Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. I'm looking at a graphic novel of one woman's journey into a terrifying dream that has lasting consequences in the real world. The name of the book is Dreams, and it's written by Ella Valentine. And I get to find out all about this because Ella is right here with me now. Ella, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here with me tonight.
Thank you.
Ella, I'm really interested in learning all about dreams and what readers are going to find here. Could you tell me all about it?
So, the book is about a girl who falls asleep one night and wakes up in what seems to be a dream world, and she has to, save those dreams from nightmares. And it's really just a story about finding appreciation for dreams and how it's just a natural form of storytelling.
What sorts of readers did you have in mind for this?
I think a lot of young adults. There's some themes in the book that can seem scary to maybe some younger audiences, but I think it's young adult maybe.
So Ella, how did this come about? How were you inspired to get started on it?
For my whole life, I've really enjoyed storytelling and telling stories and reading them, that I just decided one day, what's stopping me from making my own story and what's stopping me from making my own book? So I decided one day I'd just sit down and start creating the story.
I love it. Is this your first go at this kind of thing, or have you done it before?
This is my first time.
Congratulations. So being your first time, did this take you like forever to do?
Yeah, it took a lot of years. I started whenever I was 12. Now I'm 15.
So what would you say was the most challenging part of it all, especially that publishing process? There's so much involved in there, and a lot of new authors are often surprised by what that involves.
Yeah, I think the hardest part was publishing. It was a really good process, but, it takes some time. But it was really, really good, though.
And being a graphic novel, I can imagine the illustrations were hugely important in this. So can you tell me about that whole process?
I started a long time ago. I spent all my summer one year drawing all of the pictures. I spent a lot of days just sitting down, drawing every single one of them. And yeah, they took some time.
Wow. I didn't realize that you were the one that drew those. They're beautiful, Ella.
Thank you.
So that day finally came after all that time, all the hard work that you put into this, and you open up the mailbox and there it is, the first copy of Dreams, and you get to hold it and your name's on the cover of this thing and everything. Ella, what kind of a moment was that like for you?
I was blown away. I was really surprised. I didn't feel like it was real. It was just really just so surprising.
So do you think you would do it again? Do you think you got some more of these in you?
Oh yeah, I have a lot more stories I'm working on right now, actually.
Fantastic. So is there something that you could say to yourself, hey, I'm going to do this differently the next time than you did maybe on this one?
I think I'm going to write maybe more plot twists, more complex stories, more emotional, maybe.
When you started writing the story, did you have sort of an outline in mind? Maybe not necessarily written, but maybe you had the whole thing mapped out in your head from beginning to end? Or did you just kind of start writing and maybe see where the story went from there?
Yeah, I kind of had bits and pieces I had already thought of, but whenever I first started writing everything down, that's whenever I finally started to make everything mapped out.
And so now it's official, Ella. You're a published author. So when you think about that, what's the most rewarding part of it all for you?
I think it's just realizing that I can put in so much work into something that I really wanted, and I can actually make something like that happen, that, it doesn't really matter who you are. You can continue your dreams.
While you were writing this, was writer's block or any of that kind of thing something you had to deal with?
Surprisingly not for this book. I just kind of kept on writing.
I'm sure the whole thing was a huge learning experience for you. So is there anything in the way of advice now that you could throw out there for aspiring authors who are listening?
I think if you feel like you're too young or too old to begin writing a book, truly there's no limit to writing and starting this career.
Great advice.
Thank you.
So, Ella, if there was one big theme, one major idea that you'd want every reader to come away with after they've read Dreams, what would you say that is?
Really, dreams are overlooked, and they're really just a natural art of storytelling that it should be appreciated more often, I think.
What an interesting book. I think people are really going to love this. Again, the title of it is Dreams. It's written by Ella Valentine and published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can find it really everywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Ella, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me all about Dreams. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Author Scott Campbell Brown has written a new book that's an exploration of the Apostle John's journey. It's titled John, Beloved by Jesus, a novel. Scott is right here with me now. We get to talk all about it. Scott, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, the pleasure's all mine, Scott. I'm interested in learning all about John, Beloved by Jesus. Can you tell me about this?
Well, it was a pleasure to write this book. I'd like to begin by first giving a shout out to Christian Faith Publishing for their excellent work on editing, formatting, and cover of the book. It was a pleasure working with them. I guess the first thing I'd like to say, so that I don't offend everybody, is that the most important word to remember in the title after Jesus is probably novel. It is a work of historical fiction. And I want to be very clear that all quotations from Scripture are derived from the American Standard Version Bible. They are not exact, but derivations for the sole purpose of telling the story. The order of quotations are rearranged to create dialogue or singing, and I really encourage readers who seek the real truth, I encourage them to go out and seek out a real Bible, and I hope my book inspires them to do so. That said, I sort of like to compare my story to It's a Wonderful Life. For those of you who've seen the movie, George Bailey's guardian angel, Clarence, shows George all the lives he touched and what the world would be like if George had not existed. In a similar vein, although my novel is a novel, the book should give you a sense of what the Bible would be like if the books penned by John were not in the Bible. So to give you a quick sense, because I obviously can't go over everything, I like to have the four themes of what I call the four L's: the Lamb, the Light, the Life, and Love.
How did the idea for this come about? What made you decide to sit down and get started on this?
Well, I was always inspired by both the book of John and the first letter of John. They teach us that Jesus is the Lamb of God, Jesus is the light of the world, Jesus is the life, and Jesus commands us to love one another. These messages have always inspired me. So I really pray that my book draws readers closer to the promises of God, inspires them to read their favorite Bible, and maybe even gives them a few laughs. Sometimes it gets a little irrelevant along the way.
So would you say that the readers that you had in mind for this were primarily the believing audience?
Primarily. And I think the book may have an appeal to very strong believing Christian women, because I do emphasize the strong women in John's life. Both his birth mother, Salome, who becomes a faithful follower of Jesus, but endures much heartache throughout her life, and of course, his born-again mother, who Jesus commands that he become her son and she becomes his mother. And I kind of play around with that a little bit because I often wondered, how did those commands go down in the two families? The Bible never really tells us. But do you think the two brothers James really like those sorts of things? And I explore that a little bit.
Interesting. So once you sat down, you got started on this, Scott, how long of a process was this for you, the writing and the editing process and everything?
Very long. I worked on the book for 2 years, and then the editing and the formatting and the design of the cover took another year with Christian Faith Publishing.
So once you handed that manuscript off to Christian Faith and you got that ball rolling, what would you say was the most difficult part of that for you?
I would say the editing was very tough. I'm integrating Bible verses, and then one of the interesting things we did was every chapter has a hymn as the title. And we did this to let the hymn be a little guide for what's happening in each chapter.
It sounds like a lot of readers will be inspired and will be pointed toward the Bible with this book. Again, it's titled John, Beloved by Jesus, a novel. It's written by Scott Campbell Brown, and it's published by Christian Faith Publishing. So find it at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Scott, thanks again for coming on the show and talking with me all about this. It was really great talking.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a privilege and an honor to meet with you, and I hope you'll have me back again sometime.
Sherie, a story of tragedy and hope. This is a new book co-written by Sherie Abel Keck, Dr. Jeanette Kleger, and Nancy Keck Molina. And right now I'm speaking with Sherie's sister-in-law, Vicki Joan Keck, and she led the publishing of this book. Vicki, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to learn all about this book and everything that went into it. So, Vicki, first of all, can you tell me about Sherie, a story of tragedy and hope, and what readers are going to find when they get into it?
Sherie Abel Keck was an amazing woman who lived an amazing life, and unfortunately she did pass away in July of 2022, which is why she can't be here to tell you her own story. When she was 32, she was visiting her sister in Hawaii. She dove into a wave which picked her up, threw her, and broke her spine.
Wow.
She became a quadriplegic. She was never able to walk again, although she did get some use of her arms. But she had an amazing love of the Lord and really believed in God and believed until the end that God was going to heal her. She met my brother after her accident, sometime in the mid-90s. I think she was about 35 at the time, and my brother was he was 14 years older. But my brother had chronic back pain and was also someone who really loved Jesus. And they met, and they were able to really understand each other. They really connected. They were able to understand the pain that each other was going through. And they just had a wonderful relationship. And they eventually married, and they were married for 7 years before Sherie died. My brother, unfortunately, also died about a year later, partly just from grief.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a wonderful story, though, and it is full of hope. People who are dealing with disability, I think, would really get a lot out of this book because it talks about all the different things she went through, how in the hospital she just wanted to die. She kept begging them to, unplug her from the life support. But as time went on, she realized she really had a purpose and she really wanted to live. And her family surrounded her with love. It's really a very beautiful story. And beautifully told.
So once this was started and this is in production, was this a long process to get it written and put through that publishing process? I know you led the publishing on this. Was that difficult?
Well, I am a printer by trade. I ran a print shop for many years. In fact, I helped Sherie when she was alive. We put a book together, basically the same book, but without all the editing that Covenant Books did. I put all the chapters together into a bound book, and we made about 10 copies, which she took around to different places to see if they were interested in publishing her story. So she did have a few copies earlier on, which I helped produce. And then after Sherie died, Steve came into a little bit more money because of that. And he really felt it was very important that Sherie's story be told. So he self-published the book. But he got a hold of me because I had the main manuscript. So I was the one that sent this manuscript to Covenant Books. Steve didn't have a lot of computer skills, And so I was the main contact with Covenant Books in the publishing of this book.
Well, how inspiring. I think so many readers are going to really love this story. Again, the title of the book is Sherie, A Story of Tragedy and Hope. This is co-written by Sherie, Abel, Keck, Dr. Jeanette, Kleger, and Nancy Keck, Molina, and is published by Covenant Books, so you can find it everywhere, really, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Vicki, thank you so much again for coming on the show and telling me all about this, Sherie's story, and all about this book. It was really great talking with you tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Author Jeff Everett has written a new book. It's titled No Jesus, No Heaven, No Salvation. This book explores the doubts and struggles that believers often face about salvation. Jeff is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we're going to talk all about it. Jeff, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jeff, can you tell me all about what you've written about in No Jesus, No Heaven, No Salvation?
Yeah, the title came about in the middle of the night. And I know I've been struggling with the security of our salvation and to really know if there's really a true assurance to our salvation. And I couldn't sleep, and it was going on for day after day. I was losing sleep. And so in the middle of the night, I got up and started writing things that were coming to me. And I know it was inspired from God because everything that was in that book, it was guided by the Holy Spirit. I didn't call one person. It was a reference from the Bible and the Holy Spirit. The reason why we struggle with our salvation is because of the lifestyle we live. And many of us believers too, there's things in our life that we want to hold on to, and the things that in our life we let go as soon as we accept Jesus as our Savior. But some things, for some reason, we hold on to it, and it causes us to doubt whether we are really saved. Because when we become saved, we become new creation. Old things pass away, and all things become new. And that's talking about in the spiritual realm. You're not talking about flesh, because flesh is not being born again here. Only the spirit is being born again and regenerated. So therefore, when we were born with sin nature because of the fall of Adam. And because of it, every one of us, when God created every human being in the mother's womb, he already knew, according to Psalm, he already knew every one of us. When we were born, we were already born with that sentence hanging over our head. And so only way to clear that up is to acknowledge what Jesus did on the cross and know that he is the Son of God in the flesh. Many of us, it's hard to believe, that Son of God come in the flesh and go through mocking, humiliation, and live just like human being and still be able to save the world. Because in the beginning, according to Romans, he said, I come not to condemn the world, but to save the world. And that means world means people, not the earthly, physical world. But because of my lifestyle, and I was struggling whether or not I was really saved because those things I was holding on to before I became saved. And I find out that many other Christians are struggling the same way that I did. They're holding on to things that they don't want to let go. And as a result of it, their conscience is bothering them and they're doubting their salvation. According to the Bible, salvation is not based on human merit, but solely on the work of Christ on the cross. Nothing else. It's not what we do, what we don't do. Salvation is eternal and it cannot be revoked. And it is irrevocable because before the foundation of the world, we were already chosen to be saved. Salvation was already in the plan before the foundation of the world.
Jeff, would you say you were writing this primarily for believers, or did you have other readers in mind as well?
I have both believers and unbelievers to read this book. Unbelievers doesn't know what it means to be saved. But no one has to understand what salvation is about. No one has to know who Jesus Christ is, because to understand the Bible, how long is it going to take? Nobody's going to understand the Bible thoroughly. And so every man is drawn to God by Holy Spirit. They don't come on their own. No one seeks God on their own. They always have their back to God.
Well, I think that believers out there and non-believers alike are really going to get a lot out of this. Again, the book is called No Jesus, No Heaven, No Salvation. It's written by Jeff Everett and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it everywhere, places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Jeff, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me about this book. I had a good time talking with you.
Thank you. You too.
Author Shaun Andrews has written a guide to overcoming life's challenges through the power of God's Word. The name of the book is What is Your Issue? We get to talk all about this. Shaun, the author, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Shaun, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Shaun. Can you tell me all about what is your issue? What are readers going to find here?
Well, you'll find my testimony parallel with the Word of God, that we can overcome issues or cope with issues, that God will bless us to deal with our issues and confront them head on.
And what sorts of readers did you have in mind for this?
Anyone that has issues, young, old, anybody, because we all deal with different things. We deal with death, we deal with sickness, we deal with things. Life be life, and so everybody have issues. So everybody that wants to deal with what they're going through.
Yeah, definitely sounds like something we all could use. Shaun, what gave you this inspiration to write the book?
Well, What is Your Issue was a sermon, one of my first sermons years ago, 12 years ago. And I always wanted it to be my first book. I've preached it several times more than any of my other sermons. So years ago, I decided I wanted it to be a book.
And have you ever done anything like that before? Have you written or published anything prior?
No, this is my first published work.
Oh, congratulations. How long of a process was this for you once you started off on it and clear up through when it was published and out there for everyone?
Probably about 6 months, me writing the book, deciding what did I want to put in and what I want to take out, and then getting it published. Because actually, my dad, before he passed away, he said, "You've been talking about that book for years, so when you going to do it?" So after he passed away, I decided, I was going to do it.
So you got your manuscript worked up, you handed that off to Christian Faith, you started that publishing process. Shaun, what did you find the most challenging part about that end of things?
Just waiting for the process to happen each step. It takes a process for me to send it in and for me to look over everything and to get it back to you. So that was the most difficult thing with it.
Then after all that work you put into it, that day came, you open up your mailbox, and there it is, your first copy of What is Your Issue? You're holding it in your hands. It's a real thing, Shaun. What was that moment like?
It was great having something of my own in my hand that I wrote every word, that it's about what the Lord had done in my life and what he would do with others. It was one of the best things that had ever happened to me.
Yeah, now it's official. You're a published author. So when you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
That other people will be able to hear what is your issue, and it won't be just local people. It can go anywhere. It can go anyone that wants the book. They can have the book, and that's a blessing to me.
Do you think you would do it again? Do you think you have more books in you, Shaun? Have you considered maybe writing some more in the future?
Yes, I have a couple other books that I'm working on, and I do want to continue writing. It's something that I've been doing for years, so this is my first published, and yes, I got more coming.
I got it right here looking at the cover, and this is a beautiful cover. Was that a tough thing for you to determine?
No, I knew I wanted different people sitting on the couch, different races, different creeds, I knew that's what I wanted. When they came up with it, it was exactly like I had dreamed it would be.
Doing this for the first time, I'm sure you learned a lot. So, Shaun, is there anything maybe in the way of advice that you could toss out there for the aspiring authors?
If it's in their heart to write, to continue to write, somebody will be there to help you work out what you need to work out as far as maybe the spelling, the grammar. Don't worry about if you can't do things like an English teacher. Just put your work out there and get the proper people to help you and know your work is just as good as anybody else's.
So as we wrap up here tonight, Shaun, if there was one big theme, one big idea that you want every reader to come away with after they've finished What is Your Issue, what would you say that is?
That they can overcome their issues, that God cares about their issues, and he's even with them in the issue.
Well, this is definitely going to be a blessing to so many readers out there. Again, the book is titled, What is Your Issue? This is written by Shaun Andrews, published by Christian Faith Publishing, and really available everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Shaun, thank you so much again for coming on the show with me. It was really great talking.
Thank you so much.
Author Gregory Roller has written a collection of poetry that is helping readers reflect and find their way forward in life. The name of the book is 40 Poems for 40 Years. We get to talk all about this. The author, Gregory, is right here with me. Gregory, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Thank you, Corey.
Absolutely. Gregory, can you tell me all about 40 Poems for 40 Years and what readers are going to get into here?
Sure. Well, it was a book that was published. I really didn't set out to have it published. I'm working on another book, which is prose. It's called Partly Truth and Partly Fiction. And the poems were just written really over a lifetime. I took the 40 poems for 40 years from the Old Testament, where the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years due to their own stubbornness and rebellion. And unfortunately, I had seasons like that. So these poems were kind of written in the desert years and just the things I've learned through suffering. And so that was how the title came about. And I'd had friends over the years just from different walks of life, from my childhood, from my military service, and they all had encouraged me. One in particular, a guy named Randy Reynolds, he was my youth pastor, and he's about 5 years older than me. But over the years, he would say, Greg, you got to get these poems in print. And finally, I got them all together. And it really came to about 40. There was a few that I culled out, but the 40 were the ones that were substantive. And I compiled those and submitted them to a publisher, and they were accepted.
What sorts of readers were you thinking about when you published this?
People that struggle, maybe a little bit hard-headed like I've been, think that they kind of can make it their own way. But anyone that's just looking for hope through difficult times.
Once you decided to collect that poetry and put it all into manuscript format, was that a long process? Was that difficult for you to do?
Yes, it was, because they were written over a long period of time, and I had to go back. And one of the poems, The Strength of Man, was actually given to me by my mother. I'd forgotten about writing it. It had been written about 25 years earlier. I'd actually written it with a pencil on paper, and she actually handed it to me one day, and she said, I found this and thought you may like it. She didn't even know I had written it. So that's kind of how, that was just a process of assimilating those from different sources.
And once you handed that off to your publisher, to Covenant Books, and you started that publishing process, what did you find the most challenging part about all of that?
Patience, I guess, and being largely unfamiliar with the publishing industry altogether. That was probably the toughest part, kind of just learning, on the go. And there were some delays, and the editing process, where I would kind of go through it and then work with their editing department. That was probably the most challenging.
And then finally, you get your first copy in after all that hard work, and you get to hold it for the first time and look at this thing, Gregory. What was that moment like?
It was really gratifying. I really appreciated their artwork. The book kind of has a look of the desert, and there's an oasis in the middle of it, so I love that. And I just really appreciated that aspect of it. And I was excited, obviously, to give to family members and people that I knew.
So now that you are a published author, Gregory, you got your work out there for the world. What's the most rewarding aspect to you of that?
I've moved all over. I'm retired military, like I said. So I went from my mom passed last year, and I moved to Mississippi, her homeland, to finish the other book that I'm writing. And I had a man, I didn't even know him, and he contacted me, I think, through Facebook or some other avenue. I'm in an infantry group, and he asked me if he mailed a copy of the book, if I would sign it for him, and he lived in Maine. That was pretty gratifying. He actually mailed it to me. I signed it, and I mailed it back, so that was really nice.
We have a lot of authors listening to us and are just starting out in all of this, Gregory. So maybe is there something you picked up along the way that you could throw out there for them as some advice?
Be true to yourself. Write about what's authentic. Write about what moves you, Don't write to please the audience. Like I said, I didn't even really think that this book would be published. And if it hadn't have been for my friends encouraging me to do that and to get the poems together, every individual poem has a story behind it. So I would just tell them to be true to themselves and stay consistent in their writing.
So you mentioned your next book is prose. Do you think in the future you might publish more poetry?
So the poems have almost been like a reprieve. and when I've been able to just take that break and write the poems, and I've had people ask me, when are you going to do a second book of poems? So maybe that's a possibility after I finish the one I'm working on now.
Well, this is going to bless so many readers. Again, the title of the book is 40 Poems for 40 Years. It's written by Gregory Roller, and this is published by Covenant Books, so grab it up at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, or also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Gregory, it's been great talking with you tonight and learning all about your poetry and everything you're working on. Thanks again for coming on the show with me.
Corey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I'm looking at a book. It's a biography of a truly extraordinary man. The name of the book is My Name is Bill, Not Buddy. This is written by Stephanie Fisher, and we're going to talk all about this. Stephanie is sitting right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Stephanie, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Stephanie, can you tell me all about My Name is Bill, Not Buddy, and what you've written about here?
Ever since I was younger, I wanted to write a book about this is my great uncle. Growing up, I had some insights as to what his life was like, but just the more that I became aware of what he accomplished and everything like that, it was just something that I felt more and more my calling to do. When I look at all of the things that I knew to be true of what he had done in his life, and I just knew that it was a story, not just for my family's sake, but it would be a story for other people. I could reach other people. I could help other people with his story. That was my purpose.
Did you have specific readers in mind, a target audience for this?
Initially, I did, but as I came to find out more information about my great uncle, I wanted to reach out to be an ally to LGBTQ plus community. But I also felt like there's lots of things that, generational, breaking the generational, not curses, but lineage and, helping our families along that way. I feel like it's something it's grown to just being one particular focus. It can help a lot of people at the same time.
So have you ever done anything like this before when it comes to writing and the whole publishing thing, or are you new to all this?
This is brand new to me.
What would you say was the most challenging part of everything? Was it that publishing end or the writing end?
I think there's times where it's kind of the whole process. There's bits and pieces. When I first started, I got a little, not tongue-tied, but I was boring myself. And my overall thought was, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I almost wanted to stop. And then decided that, I was going to try something else. And I got a different focus from somewhere else, and that helped me get back my focus. Because at the same time, the editing, I did not understand how intrusive and just completely all-encompassing the editing version can be.
So how long of a process was this for you? Did it take a while?
The editing process, the publishing process took way longer than writing the book. Writing the book took me about 6.5 weeks. And the editing process, publishing, getting it completely distributed, that took almost over a year. So yeah, very different.
And after all that work, all that time, it finally came in, that first copy. You're holding My Name is Bill, Not Buddy for the first time. Stephanie, what was that like for you?
Oh, I was shaking, hysterically. I couldn't even open the box correctly. I think I opened it the wrong way because when I flipped it over and I could have just done it that way. But and I wanted to film it because my editors were saying, if you want to try and take a video of it while you're opening it, just to let your readers know, try that. And I was just so nervous, but at the same time, I just felt so fulfilled and just so grateful for the experience.
And now that you're officially a published author, Stephanie, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of it all for you?
Knowing that I set my sights on a goal, I completed that goal, and now that I have that hunger or that, I don't want to say appetite, but I can't think of another word, that I want to continue to do this. That by completing one, I know that I can do others. I know that I can inspire other people to do the same thing. I read this not too long ago, but there's like 95% of people say they're going to write something and don't.
Right.
I like being part of the 5% that did.
And you kind of answered my next question. I was going to ask if maybe we can see some more writing from you in the future, and it sounds like you're interested.
I'm very interested. Yes, I am a teacher, and so I kind of have like a short window, but from doing this, from this first book, I know that I'm able to do it in a shorter time span if I plan everything accordingly and if I am just very much stick to my schedule. But yes, it's definitely something that I want to pursue in different genres as well.
Well, I'm sure it was quite the learning experience doing this all for the very first time. So is there anything you might have picked up that you could throw out there as maybe some advice for the other authors who are just starting out?
Keep continuing to try, even if you feel like it's not going the way that you had planned it to go, because a lot of times that's kind of how life just happens, is we have a plan, we try our best to stick to it, and it goes another way. And usually that way is the way that it's supposed to go. Another thing is if you're writing or starting any other kind of project, I would strongly suggest researching first, seeing what other people have done, picking things that work for you and your personality and incorporating those into your own and make it your own path.
Oh, I love the message of this book. Again, it's titled, My Name is Bill, Not Buddy. It's written by Stephanie Fisher and is published by Newman Springs Publishing, so really you can find it anywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Now, Stephanie, it's been great talking with you tonight. Thanks so much for coming on the show and telling me all about this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Author Kyle St. Penney has written a children's book adventure. It's titled The Quest of the Four Chiefs for the Book of Heaven. Kyle is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. We're going to talk all about this. Kyle, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about the quest of the four chiefs for the Book of Heaven, Kyle, and what readers are going to find here?
Yeah, well, I grew up with a story. I grew up in a Presbyterian church that was built in the 1870s here in Idaho. And I grew up knowing about the story, that there was four warriors that were sent as a delegation to find what they called the Book of Heaven to St. Louis. And I only ever knew about the very basics of it as a kid, of course. And it wasn't until I had my two kids of my own that I wanted to learn, A, more about it, and B, to write about it to share with them. And it was quite the quite the research endeavor that I had when coming across the new details. And it wasn't just the warriors themselves. They were actual chiefs, which is upgraded from what I was taught growing up. But that's basically what I wanted to share in this book.
Have you ever done anything like this before when it comes to writing and children's books and all that?
No. Honestly, it was hard for me to make this sort of minimize it and simplify it into something that would be perfect for a children's book, as well as something that would mystify the reader to show that not every tribe is the same. In fact, the story is about two tribes actually that join together that want to find this, what they call the Book of Heaven, and only come to find out that it's actually the Bible that they're wanting to acquire. And I really love the story behind it because some of it is a little bit room for interpretation, like the ending, and I'll leave the readers up to decide if they want to go with what I've put in as fact versus legend, so to speak.
So you sat down, you got started on it, and then clear up through when it was done and published and out there and everything, Kyle. Was this a long journey for you?
It was actually as long as it needed to be, so to speak, because whenever I would help with my wife with putting down our newborn daughter, I would actually, as I was rocking her to sleep, I would begin writing. And so I initially started the research as my wife was in labor with my daughter. And then, I just thought I'd carry on the spirit of writing to the same book and begin the details, putting them all together. Just the words seem to flow because I'm literally thinking, how do I want to tell this to you, my daughter? How would I want to say this to my son? And so I'm just literally holding it as she's falling asleep. Hopefully falling asleep to my voice, just telling her the story of what I want to tell her when she understands, especially.
And once you hooked up with Christian Faith Publishing, you started that publishing process. Kyle, what did you find the most challenging part of that for you?
I did not know what I did not know. It was something that I didn't know how to begin the working with a publisher, because these days everyone's saying, oh yeah, if you want to get your book out there, you can just self-publish. And I have done that once, and I thought, okay, yeah, I'll just put together a PDF and then stick a label on it, and it's out there on Amazon. But I'm so glad it's a lot more to it than that. I felt like it was well processed and refined, fine-tuned before its release.
And it finally came in that day you're holding your first copy of this and looking at it. It was a real thing, Kyle. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
I'm just glad that the package arrived with my kids there because they got to see. It was more so for them, and I was wanting them to see their face. And I remember just the wonder of seeing my son. He's learning words now these days. He's 2. So he was able to say, wow. And I loved it. I love that they both have it in their hands to read from. And my daughter is 1 now, and so she is slowly learning to appreciate books. She loves that my wife and I read to her. And of course, our son does as well, but he's well advanced in his wanting to read.
So looking down the road, do you think you would do it again? Do you think you'd write again, publish more?
Oh, yes. I'm actually in the process of writing something else as well.
Wonderful. Again, the book is titled The Quest of the Four Chiefs for the Book of Heaven. It's written by Kyle St. Penney. published by Christian Faith Publishing and available at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Thank you again, Kyle, for being here on the show with me and telling me all about this book. It was really nice talking with you.
Yes, thank you again for having me.
The book I'm looking at right now is A Call to Faith and Inner Peace. It's written by Mara-Yanka. It's titled When the Angel Speaks, Listen. And we're going to talk all about it. Mara-Yanka is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Mara-Yanka, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
You're quite welcome.
Mara-Yanka, can you tell me all about When the Angel Speaks, Listen? What are readers going to find here?
Okay, well, let me start at the beginning. Okay, it's kind of lengthy, but this is my story. In 2019 and close to 2020, an angel came to me and he said he wanted me to write a book. And I was in my 70s and I'm like, hey, I'm old. I'm not well. I have health problems. This doesn't sound something like I really wanted to do. But anyhow, he was bugging me. One night when I woke up, he gave me a word. And in the morning, the word was ubiquitous. And I'm like, what the heck is ubiquitous? I've heard of it. So I went to my dictionary, and it means all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipresent. In other words, God is all over. He loves us so much, he's everywhere. So what happened was I told my husband, he says, well, I think now is the time to write the book. It took me 4 years. He talked to me, especially in the early part of the morning. This is a true story. He told me what to write. What is in the book is not done by my hand. It's when the angel spoke. I have tons and tons of notebooks that he told me. And then eventually around the 4th year, I started composing it and I sent it to Christian Faith and they were quite pleased with it and it got published. But the interesting thing about the book that I have to tell you, it has different sections, okay? You start off and in the section, the first one, it's like an introduction to God. And it doesn't mention church. What the angel told me to write was, you go to a house of worship. What's happening, Corey, is there's a lot of sadness in heaven. And it's statistically known. People have, they've walked away from the church, from God. Very few people go to church. Very few people believe in God. Very few people feel there is a God. In fact, there was a movement when they said God is dead. God is not dead. He loves us so much that he is. And because he came to me, he said, I want you to write this book, and I want people to know this. The book is not intended to hurt anybody. It's to open up our eyes and see what's going on, what's happening in the world. There is so much hate in this world right now. I mean, I can go on and on. So I wrote the book and I sent it in. Like I said, there's different parts to it. But one of the parts I liked the best was the angel told me poems. I think in poems, you can really get the message across.
Mara-Yanka, what sort of a reading audience did you have in mind for this?
Anybody and everybody. I know I have gotten Corey feedback that was not nice. Someone called me, they called me from another, and the woman was 90 years old. She's blasting me away. But I try to talk. I don't yell, I don't scream. My husband says, don't argue with them, just let them talk. And there are going to be things in the book that people are not going to like. You got to remember, this is not my hand that is writing this. This is the angel of the Lord, and he's telling me what to write.
Is there any advice, Mara-Yanka, that you have for the aspiring authors who are listening to us right now?
Oh, if you have it in your heart, just go for it. Hey, listen, I was in my 70s and I did it. I was kind of hesitant at first, but once I started doing it, and I'll tell you, really, now that I've done it, I'm glad I did it. And don't be afraid, have faith in yourself. And not only that, have trust in yourself. And you can do it.
That's great advice, Mara-Yanka. Thank you. Again, it's titled, When the Angel Speaks, Listen. It's written by Mara-Yanka and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it really everywhere, like at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Mara-Yanka, thank you again for joining me and telling me all about this book. It was really nice talking with you tonight.
It was great talking to you.
The book I'm looking at right now is an inspiring tale of animal rescue. The name of the book is Saving Tucker. This is written by Kitty Sexton, and Kitty is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we get to talk all about this book. Kitty, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is all mine, Kitty. I'm excited to learn all about Saving Tucker, so can you tell me all about it?
Yes, it's about a little kitten that we actually fostered. He was brought into the animal shelter when I was working there one morning. There was no one else to take him in. He was only 2 weeks old, and he needed to have round-the-clock care with bottle feeding and all. So I said, well, I guess I'm going to start now.
So what inspired you to write this book?
Just my love for animals, and the story came really easy to me. One day I was in my glass studio and the TV was on. The game show was on and the host was talking to a contestant and he said, "What do you do?" And she said, "I write children's books." And that's when I realized I too could write a children's book.
Have you ever done anything like this before?
No, never.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
So this is your first time, and I'm sure you had a lot of questions about things. So was this whole process a really long one for you?
It took about, a little less than a year, but it was very easy with the publishing company, Christian Faith Publishing. They just walked me right through everything. So I found it very easy.
Once you handed it off to Christian Faith, you started that publishing process. Kitty, what did you find the most challenging part of that for you?
Probably just waiting on everything to come together because, you have to submit your manuscript and then they review it and they send it back to you to make sure that all the corrections they have done are what we would like. And so we have to approve everything. And then I had an illustrator, a wonderful illustrator. I had to wait on him to do the illustrations, of course. And so just the time I think that it took I was a little impatient.
Well, I'd say it was worth that wait. You mentioned the illustrator, and I'm looking at the cover right now, and the illustrations are beautiful. Tucker's so cute.
They are. Yes, thank you. Ed did a really great job on the illustrations, and it was just a blessing to be able to work with him, and it really made the book come alive.
So much of your hard work, so much of your time went into this, and then you finally got your first copy. You were holding Saving Tucker in your hands for that first time, Kitty. What was that moment like for you?
Well, I was feeling a real sense of accomplishment, I guess, and it was just amazing to see it in print, and I love getting feedback from everyone, so that's been great to see all the positive reinforcement, basically, on it. It's just amazing.
Now that you're a published author, your work is out there. Kitty, what's the most rewarding part of that for you?
Well, the feedback is the best. I have a friend of mine who gave my book, Saving Tucker, to a friend of his. And they loved the book so much that it inspired them to go out and adopt 2 cats. And they named the 2 cats Tucker and Kit. So that is just amazing.
So looking down the road, do you think you would do it again? Do you think you would write some more and get some more books published?
Yes, definitely. I do have another one in progress right now. It's going to be very similar to Saving Tucker, but it's a story of another cat that we fostered and her kittens. It's going to be called Saving Spot, and we actually kept one of the kittens. So that's been very rewarding, and hopefully that will come to fruition also.
It's hard to do something this big all alone, and most of the time it's easier if you maybe have some support behind you. Some people that know you're taking this on and they could be there for you and maybe keep you encouraged or motivated along the way. Yes. Kitty, were there people like that in your life?
Definitely. My husband is my biggest support system. He would I would just let him read through what I was writing, and we would change a few things here and there. He helped me along the way. Also, my illustrator and his wife. His wife is very good at writing also, and so she would read the manuscript and give her 2 cents worth. They were a big support for me.
What a wonderful book. I think readers are going to really love this. Again, the title is Saving Tucker. This is written by Kitty Sexton, published by Christian Faith Publishing, and available places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Kitty, it's been really nice talking with you tonight and learning all about Tucker. Thanks again for joining me here.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this little interview. I'm so happy and excited to be with you. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.